As a non-birder, could you give your best definition of what a birder is?
I can. A birder, I'd say, is someone who puts a lot of effort into bird watching.
I guess it's just someone that likes to look at birds, stalk them a little bit, I guess.
And is that opposed to a bird watcher?
Yes, I would say so. Okay. A bird watcher would be someone who does it as a hobby, but a birder would do it as also a hobby, I'd say, but definitely a lot more effort put into it. They catalogue it.
Yeah.
Catalogue which birds they do. They do big lists, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know sort of any difference between the term birder and bird watcher?
Not that I know of, honestly.
What do you think a twitcher is?
Ooh. I would think a twitcher is sort of like the YouTuber of birders, they just catalogue it on the internet.
I've heard some negative things about it.
What do you think a negative stereotype of birders is?
I would definitely say a negative stereotype about people who birdwatch overall would be they're all old people.
I guess it's just, old retirees, grandparents with dementia doing it a lot.
What do you think positives of birdwatching are? Birding.
I'd say birdwatchers would be more environmentally mindful than people who don't. And as a birder, if you do it more intensely, you would be very involved in the ecological community.
Probably really calming, relaxing, just looking at nature. You get to go out into a lot of nice places, I guess.
Now, my understanding of the different terms is that a birdwatcher is someone who refers to themselves as such, and are generally not super serious about birding. They don't use slang, they probably don't have a spotting scope or anything, they're just a birdwatcher who does it to relax, in their gardens or on walks. Personally, I would only use the term birdwatching to describe what I do to people who aren't acquainted with birding. The term birder is usually a much wider range, includes a casual birder who has just got binoculars and occasionally goes out to their local area to do some birding, but it also includes twitchers that will travel long distances to see individual rare birds that have turned up in the area by accident. Birders will often be photographers, but generally if they think of themselves as a birder, they'll be more bothered with seeing species than getting good photographs, whereas wildlife photographers usually would spend more time taking photographs of animals they think are good looking rather than trying to see rare species. A twitcher is someone who is often obsessed with seeing more and more species for their list. The bigger the list, the more fulfilling the hobby feels, and I think that there is no problem with that, as long as it doesn't get in the way of your morals.
How does birding affect your life?
Yeah, so for me, birding is really important for my mental health. Just being able to go out and decompress out in the field. I'm a PhD student and I study birders, and that can get stressful just being a student, having homework, studies, all that, projects, but being able to go out and leave that behind while I'm out birding and experience nature is priceless. So that's probably the biggest way that it affects my life, just has a very positive impact on my mental health.
Birding for me birding literally saved my life. So birding for me, it's what grounds me. It's what keeps my mental health in a decent state. When I'm down, I go birding. When I'm happy, I go birding. And all these sort of things. So birding literally is kind of my grounding. It centers me. So it's been a huge part of my life. I had a mental health episode back in 2011, and that's when I picked birding back up after having put it down for years. And that's why I say birding quite literally saved my life.
And then, what's your favourite part of birding, your favourite general sort of subsection?
My favorite part of birding is definitely the community. There's a lot of friendships that I have that have come through birding specifically. And there's a social aspect to birding when you especially at like a rare bird stakeout, just being able to see a whole bunch of people that you don't see outside of birding is fun. And then just behind that is obviously the birds themselves, appreciating like the beauty in nature. And I mean, some of these birds I see thousands of times a year, but it's still really, really cool to observe like their behaviors and stuff. Like an American coot, for example. I know y'all have coots over in the UK.
Yeah.
They're everywhere, but they do things sometimes that you may have never seen before. So paying attention to those details is really awesome as well. So those two things are my favorite.
For me, It's got to be watching behaviour. Behaviour is, to me, is fascinating. But back home, I built a feeding station the other week because I started to notice that when the squirrel came in, all of a sudden 5 pigeons would arrive at the same time. And the 5 pigeons, actually, it turned out they would sit and watch the squirrel for 10-15 minutes as he was eating on some fat balls. And he's dropping bits down on the floor. As soon as the squirrel went, the pigeons are down. They're waiting for the squirrel to come in. They see him come in, and they've learned that he dislodges the food. They can then go down and get it. They don't have to. So that kind of behaviour just absolutely fascinates me, and that's what's always drawn me to birding.
For you, what is the best feeling that you can get whilst birding?
The best feeling goes back to the mental health side of things, just being calm and relaxed. Listening to the birds' calls is really, really soothing.
Yeah.
And then just behind that, second best feeling is that adrenaline rush when you travel several hours to see a rare bird and you actually find it, because there's a lot of times you don't see the bird you go to look for. But when you do, you get this big adrenaline rush and this big dopamine hit, and it's just one of the best feelings in the world. So those two feelings are probably my favorites in birding.
The feeling of being present, the disconnect you get from life, I think, being able to shut everything else off and just being there in that moment and enjoying something that is so, I don't know, evolutionary perfect. Like, just staring at birds' feathers is just incredible. The structure of those feathers and the way they move, the way they feed, the way they interact with each other. You're just completely and utterly, at that moment, your brain is isolated from all the noise around you, and you're just in such a real connection. It grounds you to that moment, allows you just to get away from everything. So for me, that absolutely is the best part of it, the best feeling I get from it.
And just for fun, what is your favourite bird?
Yeah, favorite bird is the greater roadrunner. It's a cultural icon in the Looney Tunes, but also just in like real world, it's a bird. It's actually there you go, little, if it doesn't blur, this is the background on the phone, but it's a cuckoo, which it's unique in that family of birds. And then also too, it primarily runs across the ground, hence its name.
Yeah.
It can fly short distances, but it typically chooses not to. And they're also just extremely intelligent creatures as well.
Yeah.
And I've seen them jump up and snatch hummingbirds off of hummingbird feeders and gobble them up. So they eat lizards and stuff too. I don't know. They're just incredible.
Yeah.
My favourite bird is spotted flycatcher. And that's because I rediscovered them in an area where they were thought to have disappeared for about sort of 10 years, 15 years. And I happened to rediscover one male and then found a nest. So I then ended up monitoring them for about 4 years. I ended up finding 4 breeding pairs within this small woods. So they became very close to my heart. And that is why spotted flycatcher is definitely my favourite bird.
You're a birder. Would you call yourself a twitcher?
Yes and no. There's a little bit in the United States. There's a little bit of a negative stigma attached to twitchers because they kind of zoom past all of the the commonplace stuff, and they're kind of known for just appreciating anything that's new. And that's definitely not what I fall into. Do I chase rare birds? Yes, I definitely do. I don't do every single one that shows up.
Yeah.
But I definitely chase rare birds, and so I would say I fall somewhere in the middle. I do go twitching, but I don't think I'm a twitcher.
No, I don't keep a list necessarily. I record every bird that I see using BirdTrack, eBird, Birder, whichever app I'm happen to be using. For me, it's more about what those sightings do in terms of a scientific citizen science. The scientific side of things is very much kind of my interest. And so I do go and see rare birds. I do twitch. Whether you want to call me a recovering twitcher, I don't know. That's a potential. But no, I wouldn't consider myself a twitcher. I don't do it competitively. I would say probably I'm a bird watcher. I'm a birder. I will sit quite happily with a cup of tea and just watch the sparrows in the park. or I will sit with a scope studying waders and looking for those colourings on them that me or colleagues have put on them. So that's kind of where I sit. I would probably span all of it. But if you had to pigeonhole me, I suppose I would be a birder, not anything else.
And what would you say a positive of twitching and going for a rare bird is?
The community aspect, for sure. Just being able to see, when there's a rare bird that shows up, most of the birders in the region are going to converge on that bird. And so you get to see all your friends.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And meet new people.
It's got to be the community. I think that's got to be one of the real positives. And I think realistically, it puts a lot of money into conservation. A lot of these guys and girls are very obsessional about their hobby. They'll spend 20 quid to get into a reserve to see one bird. And if 1,000 of them are going to see one bird, that's a lot of money that's suddenly come into the RFPV, the BTO, the Wildlife Trust, whoever they're going to. I think that could be a positive because a lot of money goes into conservation then. But as well, the community, I've met some fantastic people twitching. And they are, like you say, twitchers are usually birders. So if I'm there seeing a rare bird on my local patch and all the twitchers have turned up, actually I'll catch up with a bunch of people, a bunch of birders from across the country that otherwise I don't get really to see. And you then stand, you have that little social aspect, you see the bird, again you bond over that bird. Like I said earlier, you're all drawn with that common kind of central theme.
What is a downside of twitching?
Yeah, there's probably more downsides than upsides. It depends on who you ask, but I think a big downside of twitching is hundreds, sometimes thousands of people converging on a bird could potentially spell disaster for that bird. So in Maine, a few years ago, we had a Steller's sea eagle show up, which is an incredible species of bird, and thousands of people went to go see that bird. Luckily, they stayed a fair distance away, but typically with things like snowy owls, when they show up in areas that they're not normally supposed to be in, and you have tons of people showing up, especially photographers. There's kind of a subculture for photographers. They are less well-behaved than birders. They'll stress the bird out. Sometimes they'll intentionally try to get birds up in the air in flight to get their pictures. And then birds like run into a car and die, or hit a train, or they get so stressed out that they can't find food. So that's probably the main negative.
I think the behaviour of some twitchers, it doesn't give birders a good name. It doesn't paint us in a good light. And for someone that doesn't know birding, twitching, doesn't know the politics of it, a twitcher is a birder, is a bird watcher, is everyone. It's just an interchangeable word, which I suppose realistically we've created these pigeonholes to separate who we are. But to someone that's on the outside, they don't necessarily see the nuance of that. So I think that's definitely the overarching negative. Not to mention the carbon footprint.
In conclusion, I think that birding can be a beautiful thing. It brings people together, creates a community, and gives you a purpose in life outside of whatever else you happen to be doing. Some people do it competitively, some people do it casually, some people do it to relax, some people do it for the adrenaline. Either way, birding is a great hobby, and although it has its downsides with people who can often be too competitive, birding is an enjoyable and welcoming hobby to be in.